censorship, let me define it first of all. News management is what every news station, newspaper does, and they say, we're going to cover this because it concerns our listeners, and we're not going to cover this because it doesn't. Those people don't listen to it. That's news management. Censorship, as I mean it today, is the government telling you not to run something because it makes them look bad, or the country we are in look bad, or in Spain it may look bad. So that is the definition. Now, as Adrian commented, the U.S. Military Assistance Command Vietnam, MACV, that was the structure for the military forces in all of Vietnam. Now, a news OIC of AFVN, American Forces Vietnam Network, where I was, his take was there was a regulation requiring a clearance by MACV Information Office for all news stories concerned with the war. We could broadcast no story on Vietnam without the permission of the Information Office. Supposedly, the regulation was there to ensure the factual accuracy of stories and to ensure no military operations were compromised. In actuality, however, the clearance was used to suppress news items which made the military, the State Department, or the Saigon government look bad. So we looked on it as we had one operation at AFVN to give the news as straight as we could, but our bosses, MACV, they were looking out for other people. Now, here are some guidelines that were worked out, and they were probably firmed up from the days when Adrian was there. It was a policy we could not report bar bombings in Saigon. It wasn't napalm we were dropping, it was incendiary devices. We were not permitted to use any wire copy reporting U.S. action in Laos or Cambodia, even though special forces were there day to day, day in, day out, prior to the 1970 invasion of Cambodia. There was no Phoenix program, which was the assassination of tribal leaders suspected of being Viet Cong. Stories about drug use among U.S. forces were never aired on Armed Forces Radio in Vietnam.
There was a problem with that?
Apparently. Stories on government corruption and the fragile Republic of Vietnam economy were never talked about, never reported. We couldn't call it South Vietnam, it was the Republic of Vietnam. American units were never ambushed. The heavy casualties they suffered came when they encountered an unknown size enemy force in a defensive position. But our units were never ambushed. Now, there were no race riots going on back in the States. They were civil disturbances, and we were to delete all references to any black or white street fighting. Eric Severide, a CBS commentator, his commentaries on Vietnam were killed. Paul Harvey's newscast, and this was a real problem for them. They were supposed to take a newscast and air it the whole thing and not take things out. Well, he continually called the Vietnam War that dead-end war and those tin-horn dictators. So they got to where they would edit those lines out. And I don't know what year it was, but when Paul Harvey said, "Mr. President, I love you, but you're wrong," about the Vietnam War, that turned a lot of heads around. And then in 1970, in January 3rd, 1970, we had a guy, Spec 5 Bob Lawrence, get on our TV news, and he had tipped off the networks, so they were all rolling tape, and so this made news back home. And in his words, in the military in Vietnam, I've found that a newscaster at AFVN is not free to tell the truth and is, in essence, and not able to tell it like it is. MACV and the MACV Office of Information have seen to it that all those newscasters who are dedicated to their work are sent away to other areas, in some cases off the air completely. We have been suppressed, and I'm probably in trouble for telling you tonight and the truth. I hope you help stop censorship at AFVN and any American station under military rule. Well, he was immediately off the air. There was a sports guy sitting next to him, and I think he said something like, "Thanks, Bob, for what you said." He was washing Jeeps the next day. The Army has no, or the military has no sense of humor. Okay, so for a while the TV newscast had to be taped after that. There was a congressional investigation. Arkansas Senator William Fulbright and California Congressman John Moss conducted inquiries. Moss and his staff members came to Vietnam, and in the words of one AFVN member, all of us who were newsroom veterans were scattered around the country prior to the visit of Congressman Moss and made inaccessible. Well, we were living in hotels in downtown Saigon. Now, they weren't the Hilton, but they were a hotel, and we were immediately sent to Tan Son Nhut Air Base to live in barracks because they were very mad at we hadn't done anything, only but all of a sudden we had to do things like stand guard duty. We'd never done that before. I mean, but apparently things did get. I left in June of 1970, and apparently things did get better after Congress looked at that situation. But here's two examples of the media not getting it right. Here's a guy at AFVN. We fought one action that involved a lot of ammunition. 15 boats and about 70 men against a modest force. My boat took 3 Hoi Chans, whatever that is, who generally agreed that there were about 100 men in their unit. As a unit, we took about 20 prisoners. We also killed about a dozen of them. Not a bad day's work. But by the time the word got back to us via the news, we had been hit by a battalion and killed at least 100. So, and then here is a guy who was a public information officer for MACV, and this is another way the news can get twisted. During my final briefing to the press in January 1973, I told the gathered news reporters that I was glad that during my tour I was able to give them the information they needed to file their stories. I added, I regretted those few times when I couldn't give them all they needed to know due to ongoing operations and security reasons. Then I said goodbye to them. The next day on the front page of a major newspaper appeared the headlines. U.S. spokesman in Vietnam admits lying to the press for the last year. So those were the examples. Now, I said in my bio that John read that I never had a shot fired at me. I was very lucky, but as Tony mentioned, Tet was the start of the turning of the war against us. And that began, I think, in January 68. But let me give you 2 examples at Armed Forces Radio, a month apart. The first one is in May. Here's a guy reading a newscast.
Incident broke out near the building where the UN command in North Korea were creating charges of border violations. U.S. and North Korean officers.
Okay, now a month later, a guy's doing the morning show. Our morning show is called The Dawn Buster, and listen how smoothly this guy recovers.
So here we go again. Yes, we're ready to go here on a Tuesday, June 11th of the Dawnbuster radio program. 0616 is our time. I'm Army Specialist Jim Burnside. The All-American Boy! With a show with a bang, the Dawnbuster.